It all began on a quiet evening in Dubai. The city lights shimmered against the glass windows of his penthouse, but what caught his attention wasn't the skyline. It was something far more intimate. Zaid al-Hakim, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the Middle East, returned home late from a board meeting. As he walked past the playroom, he noticed something unusual. His young son was asleep, but the caregiver, a modest woman named Amina, sat alone at the kitchen table with a single cupcake lit by one tiny candle. She smiled faintly to herself, whispering "Happy birthday" under her breath before blowing it out in solitude. In that moment, this billionaire executive, who had built empires, crushed rivals, and sat at the head of global deals worth billions, felt his heart pulled by something he couldn't negotiate away: raw, human loneliness. Zaid had seen extravagance, but he had never seen quiet sacrifice celebrated with such dignity. This woman had spent her entire day caring for his child, only to end the night alone, with no one to remember her. He stood frozen, torn between stepping back and staying hidden, or doing something that might change everything. What happens when unimaginable wealth collides with the silent struggles of those who serve in the shadows? What happens when a man who thought he had everything realizes he may have overlooked the very thing money cannot buy: human connection? Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss stories like this one. Tales of power, love, resilience, and unexpected transformation. Because what Zaid chose to do next not only shocked Amina, but also redefined what it meant to be truly rich. And once you hear it, you'll understand why this story left millions speechless. Zaid al-Hakim wasn't a man who lingered on emotions. For years, his life had been driven by precision and strategy. Numbers on balance sheets, negotiations behind closed doors, and headlines that hailed him as one of the most powerful Arab CEOs in the world. His image was carefully crafted: sharp suits, expensive watches, and the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Yet as he leaned against the marble doorway that night, watching Amina extinguish the small flame on her cupcake, something inside him cracked. It was a soft crack, the kind that doesn't make a sound, but rattles a man's certainty. Zaid could have easily turned away, retreated to his private study, poured himself a glass of 20-year-old scotch, and forgotten what he had seen. But instead, he found himself frozen, eyes fixed on the woman who had just celebrated her birthday in silence. Amina was nothing like the women who usually surrounded him at galas or corporate dinners. They wore diamonds. She wore plain clothes with sleeves rolled up from a day of work. They carried designer handbags. She carried the quiet responsibility of raising a child that wasn't hers. Yet the way she smiled at that lonely cupcake, not bitter, not resentful, just quietly grateful, it unsettled him. He remembered the conversation he'd overheard weeks earlier between his son, Karim, and Amina. Karim had asked her if she ever had big birthday parties. Amina had laughed softly and said, "No, sweetheart. For me, birthdays are just another day." At the time, Zaid had dismissed it. But now, watching her whisper to herself in the dim light of his kitchen, he realized just how literal her words had been. For the first time in a long time, Zaid didn't know what to do. Power had always been his currency, but this was different. This wasn't a hostile takeover or a failing investment. This was a human heart quietly starving for recognition. And his wealth, his towering skyscrapers, his fleets of cars, all of it suddenly felt useless. He stepped forward, the sound of his polished shoes against the marble floor startling her. Amina looked up, her eyes widening, when she realized he was watching. She quickly stood, embarrassed, brushing crumbs off the table as though she had been caught doing something wrong. Mr. Al-Hakim," she stammered. "I didn't realize you were home. I was just—" Her words trailed off, and she glanced at the extinguished candle, cheeks flushing. Zaid studied her in silence for a long moment. Her humility, her discomfort at being seen, was so different from the entitlement he faced daily in his world. "Was it your birthday?" he asked finally, his deep voice carrying a weight that made her hesitate. She looked down, her fingers nervously twisting together. Yes, but it's nothing important. Nothing important. The phrase echoed in Zaid's head like a bell. How could she say that, when birthdays for his social circle meant fireworks, lavish dinners, and social media posts flaunting designer gowns? For Amina, it was a single cupcake lit in solitude. Zaid's jaw tightened. "It is important," he said firmly, surprising even himself. Amina blinked at him, her lips parting in confusion. She looked like she didn't know whether to thank him or apologize again for existing. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from years of putting others first. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, softer now. She gave a small shrug. "It doesn't matter. I didn't want to bother anyone. Besides, this house has more important things happening than my birthday." Zaid felt something stir inside him, a mix of anger and sadness. He wasn't angry at her, but at the world that had taught her to believe she wasn't worth celebrating. He took a step closer. "Amina, you spend every day caring for my son, giving him love, patience, and guidance. Do you really think your life, your day, doesn't matter?" Her eyes shimmered with a vulnerability she tried to hide. "I'm just the caregiver, Mr. Al-Hakim. Just the caregiver." Zaid hated the way those words sounded, as though her role was invisible, as though her sacrifices had no weight. He had always prided himself on seeing value where others did not, in failing companies, in overlooked investments. And yet here was someone of immeasurable worth, right under his roof, and he had been blind to it. For the first time in years, he felt shame. He didn't know why he said it, or why the words came out more like a vow than a casual statement. But they did. "That will change. Starting now?" Amina frowned, unsure of what he meant. "Sir, you don't have to—" But he cut her off with a raised hand. "No, Amina, I do. Not because of obligation, but because you deserve more than to blow out a candle alone." The silence that followed was heavy, almost electric. She stared at him, searching his face for insincerity, but found none. And for a moment she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Zaid turned slightly, glancing at his sleeping son through the glass door of the playroom. Karim stirred, safe and peaceful, unaware of the shift happening in the air between his father and his caregiver. When Zaid looked back at Amina, his decision had already been made. Tomorrow, everything would be different. He didn't know yet how, but he knew this. He could no longer allow the woman who gave his son so much light to live in the shadows, and neither of them realized that this single moment, the billionaire pausing at the sight of a lone candle, was about to change both of their lives forever. The next morning, the household stirred to its usual rhythm, Karim's laughter echoing through the halls, the staff moving swiftly to prepare breakfast, and Zaid's phone buzzing with endless calls demanding his attention. Yet beneath the polished routine, a subtle current of tension lingered. For Zaid, last night's image of Amina alone with her cupcake replayed over and over in his mind. He had faced CEOs in billion-dollar negotiations, stood unflinching before royal dignitaries, but the thought of Amina whispering happy birthday to herself unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper, something dangerously close to admiration. At the breakfast table, Karim clung to Amina's arm while she helped him with his cereal. She was radiant in her simplicity, a modest blouse, her hair tied back neatly, her focus entirely on the child. Zaid noticed the quiet joy in his son's eyes when he looked at her, a joy that was different from the way he looked at anyone else. When Amina caught Zaid's gaze, she lowered her eyes quickly, almost as if embarrassed to have been seen again. It irritated him. Why did she act as though she had no right to be acknowledged? He hated that humility had been forced upon her by circumstance. After breakfast, Zaid asked Karim to go play in the garden, and with a small nod, Amina guided the boy out. But before she could follow, Zaid spoke. "Amina, stay a moment." Her steps faltered, and she turned back, her posture stiff with caution. "Yes, Mr. Al-Hakim." He gestured toward the seat across from him. Sit. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her skirt. To her, a seat across from him wasn't a place she belonged. She was used to standing in the background, blending in. But his tone left no room for refusal. Slowly she sat. Zaid studied her for a moment, his piercing dark eyes unsettling in their intensity. He had learned to read people, to measure their value, their weaknesses, their ambitions. Yet with Amina, he couldn't pin her down. She didn't want money or influence. She wasn't calculating. She simply gave. Last night, he began, his voice low, I saw you. Her cheeks flushed and she fumbled for words. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. You didn't, he interrupted firmly. But you did make me realize something. You celebrated alone, didn't you? She gave a small nod, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I told you it's nothing important. Zaid leaned forward, his expression hard. Stop saying that. The words came out sharper than he intended, and Amina's eyes widened. She looked as though she wanted to apologize again, but he wouldn't allow it. You matter, Amina. Don't diminish yourself. His voice softened, but the conviction remained. You give my son something priceless every single day. Do you understand that? Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, though she quickly blinked them away. I do it because I care for him. That's enough for me. But Zaid shook his head. It's not enough for me. The weight of his words hung in the air, confusing her. She couldn't tell if he meant them as gratitude or as something more. To Zaid, however, the meaning was clear, even if he didn't dare admit it out loud. She had awakened something in him. A conscience he thought he had buried under years of ruthless ambition. He straightened in his chair, regaining the steel composure that defined him. I want to give you something, he said, her brows knit together. Sir, you've already given me work, a place to stay. He raised his hand again, silencing her. I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about recognition. Tonight you will not spend another birthday forgotten. Her lips parted in surprise. But it's already past. Then we will celebrate it again, he said simply, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Properly. Amina's instinct was to protest, but the intensity in his gaze silenced her. She knew this man was not accustomed to being argued with, but it wasn't fear that kept her quiet. It was confusion. Why would someone like him, a man who commanded empires, care about a forgotten birthday? Later that evening, Zaid set his plan in motion. He called in favors from luxury chefs, decorators, and musicians. Within hours, the penthouse transformed. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light, soft music filled the air, and a long dining table was adorned with flowers in delicate shades of white and pink. When Amina walked into the room, escorted by Karim, her breath caught in her throat. She had expected nothing, perhaps a small dinner at best, but this was something out of a dream. Karim tugged at her hand, beaming. Surprise! Baba said it's your birthday again. Her eyes flicked to Zaid, who stood at the head of the table in a tailored suit, watching her reaction closely. He didn't smile often, but tonight there was the faintest curve at his lips. Amina felt tears sting her eyes. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Mr. Al-Hakim, this is too much. It's not enough, he countered. His voice carried authority, but beneath it was something gentler, almost vulnerable. You deserve more than a candle in the dark. As the evening unfolded, Amina laughed more than she had in years. Karim clapped his hands to the music. Her plate was filled with foods she had never tasted before, and for the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not as just the caregiver, but as a woman with worth. Yet even in the warmth of the celebration, tension lingered in the unspoken glances between her and Zaid. Every time their eyes met across the table, it felt as if something dangerous flickered in the space between them, something neither of them dared name. When the night ended, and the last note of music faded, Amina excused herself to put Karim to bed. But as she turned to leave, Zaid's voice stopped her. Amina, he said quietly so only she could hear, this is only the beginning. Her heart pounded as she disappeared down the hallway. She didn't know what he meant, but deep down she sensed that her life and his was about to change in ways neither could imagine. The following week, the penthouse no longer felt like the same place. Something had shifted after that unexpected celebration. The staff whispered about it when they thought no one was listening. They had never seen Zaid arrange something so personal, so elaborate, for anyone outside his immediate family. Even his business partners never received such warmth. Amina noticed the change too, though she tried to ignore it. She had returned to her duties, reading to Karim, preparing his meals, making sure his laughter filled every corner of the house. But now, every time Zaid entered a room, the air thickened. It was as though their unspoken connection lingered from that night, drawing invisible lines between them. One afternoon, while Karim napped, Amina carried a tray of tea into the study where Zaid sat. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the polished wood gleaming under golden lamps. Zaid was reviewing contracts, his dark brows furrowed. When Amina entered quietly, "Tea, sir," she murmured. Setting the tray gently on the desk, he looked up, his gaze lingering on her longer than necessary. "Thank you, Amina." Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the cups. "Is there anything else you require?" "Yes," he said after a pause, his voice low but deliberate. "Your honesty." She froze, her back stiffening. "About what?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the intensity of a man used to peeling away people's defenses. "About how you feel being here. About what you think of me." Her lips parted in shock. She hadn't expected such a question. The rules of their relationship had always been clear. She was the caregiver, and he was the employer. But now he was asking for something deeper, something personal. "I'm grateful for the work," she said cautiously, lowering her gaze. "And I admire your strength, sir." "That's not what I asked," Zaid pressed, his tone sharper now. "Admiration is easy. Tell me what you truly see when you look at me." Amina swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She could lie. She could play it safe. But something inside her whispered that Zaid wasn't looking for polite words. He was looking for truth. "I see a man who hides behind walls," she admitted softly, her voice trembling. "Walls made of wealth and power, but behind them, I think you're lonelier than you want to admit." The silence that followed was heavy. Zaid's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening, as though she had struck a nerve. Few people dared to speak to him this way, let alone someone in her position. Finally he stood, moving closer until he was just a step away. His presence was overwhelming, tall, commanding, every detail of his tailored suit emphasizing his strength. "You think I'm lonely?" he asked, his voice low. She lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Yes." For a moment Zaid's mask slipped. His eyes softened, revealing a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. But then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. He straightened, regaining his composure. "You may go," he said curtly. Amina bowed her head and left, her hands shaking. But as she walked down the corridor, she couldn't shake the feeling that something dangerous had just begun. That evening, Zaid's sister Layla arrived unexpectedly, elegant and sharp-tongued. Layla had always been protective of her brother's reputation. She spotted Amina in the hallway and raised an eyebrow. "So you're the one everyone's whispering about," Layla said coolly. Amina blinked in confusion. "Whispering?" "Don't play innocent," Layla sneered. "The staff say my brother threw you a party fit for royalty. Do not mistake kindness for equality. You are here to work, nothing more." Her words cut deep, but Amina forced herself to remain composed. "I would never forget my place, ma'am." "See that you don't," Layla snapped before sweeping past her into the study. Inside, Amina overheard Layla scolding Zaid. "You're risking everything, brother. You're letting a servant blur the lines. Imagine what people will say if they find out." Zaid's response was firm, his deep voice carrying through the door. "Let them say what they want. She's different." Amina's heart raced. Different. The word both thrilled and terrified her. The next day, Karim tugged on her hand. "Amina, will you come with me and Baba to the desert this weekend?" He promised we'd go riding. Amina hesitated. She had never been invited on family outings before. "I don't think—" "Say yes," Zaid interrupted from behind them. His tone was softer than usual, almost coaxing. You belong with us. Those words echoed in her mind long after. You belong with us. Could it be true? Could she, a woman who had nothing, truly belong in the world of a billionaire? That weekend, as they drove into the desert, the golden sands stretched endlessly under the blazing sun. Karim rode ahead with one of the handlers, leaving Zaid and Amina walking side by side. The silence between them was heavy, yet charged with unspoken tension. At one point, Amina stumbled slightly on the sand. Without hesitation, Zaid's hand shot out, steadying her. His grip was strong, protective, lingering longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to fall away. The desert, the sky, everything, until it was only the two of them. But then, a storm gathered on the horizon, dark clouds rolling in, winds howling. The handlers urged them to turn back, but Zaid didn't move, his gaze locked on Amina. "Do you trust me?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, almost drowned by the rising wind. She hesitated, her heart hammering. Yes. The storm broke over them, sand whipping through the air, forcing them to run for cover. Yet even as chaos surrounded them, Amina couldn't shake the memory of his question or the way he had looked at her, as if her answer meant everything. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of something she could no longer stop. The storm passed, but its echoes remained. In the days that followed, the desert sand still lingered in Amina's hair, her clothes, her memory. More than that, Zaid's words haunted her. "Do you trust me?" She had answered yes without hesitation, but only now did she realize how dangerous that truth was. At the penthouse, life returned to routine, or so it seemed. Karim laughed, the staff worked, and business meetings filled the air with the constant hum of wealth. Yet beneath the polished marble floors and glittering chandeliers, whispers grew louder. Amina could feel the weight of curious stares, hear the faint hush of gossip cut short whenever she entered a room. One evening, as she tucked Karim into bed, she overheard two maids speaking near the hallway. "They say the CEO spends more time with her than with his own family," one whispered. "And did you see them in the desert?" She was walking beside him as though she belonged there. Amina's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She closed the door softly and pressed her back against it, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She had done nothing wrong. She was only doing her job. But the world of the rich had rules she didn't understand, and she was already breaking them without meaning to. Later that night, Zaid called her into his study. The room smelled faintly of leather and tobacco, the shelves lined with books that reached the ceiling. He was standing by the window, his silhouette dark against the city lights. "You've heard the whispers, haven't you?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with something heavier. Amina hesitated. "Yes, sir. Let them talk." He turned, his eyes sharp. "They don't know me. They don't know you. They only know the image they create in their heads. But it's dangerous," she said quietly. "Your sister, your partners, what will they think? What if they say you're compromised?" Zaid took a step closer, his presence filling the room. "I don't care what they say. What I care about is truth. And the truth is, you are not just a caregiver to me anymore." Her breath caught in her throat. The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. "Sir," she began, but her voice failed her. He closed the distance between them, his gaze unwavering. "You're afraid?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Because I don't belong in your world. Because I don't know if this is real or just kindness that will disappear tomorrow." For a moment he said nothing. Then slowly he reached out and lifted her chin with the gentlest touch, forcing her to meet his eyes. "This is real." Before Amina could respond, the door burst open. Layla stood there, her face twisted in fury. "Enough," she snapped. "I warned you, Zaid, and here you are, proving me right. Do you even realize what you're doing? To our family? To your reputation?" Zaid's jaw tightened. "Leave us, Layla." "No," Layla's voice shook with anger. "You've built an empire, brother. You've earned respect across nations. And now you're willing to throw it all away for her." Amina flinched at the venom in her tone, shame rising inside her like a flood. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the marble floor beneath her, But Zaid stepped in front of her, his broad shoulders shielding her from his sister's glare. If protecting her means losing everything else, then so be it. The silence that followed was deafening. Layla stared at him, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't comprehend his words. Then she turned her rage toward Amina. "You think you've bewitched him?" she hissed. "You're nothing. Without this family, you're no one. Remember that." Her heels clicked sharply as she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Amina's knees trembled. "She's right," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm nothing." "No," Zaid said firmly, turning back to her. He took her hands in his grip steady and warm. "You are everything." Her tears fell freely now, but his words carved themselves into her heart. She wanted to believe him, but fear still gnawed at her. Fear of being destroyed by the very world he commanded. The next morning, the conflict grew worse. A headline blazed across one of the city's gossip magazines. "Billionaire CEO spotted with mysterious woman in the desert." The blurry photo showed Zaid walking beside Amina, his hand steadying her as the storm raged. The article speculated wildly. Was she his mistress? A secret wife? Zaid threw the magazine onto his desk with a growl. "This is how they destroy lives," he muttered. Amina, pale and trembling, held her ground. "I should leave. If I stay, they'll ruin you." He looked at her with fire in his eyes. "Do you think I'd let them scare you away? They don't decide my life." "I do. But your empire, an empire without truth, is just sand," he interrupted. His voice was fierce, unshakable. "And I won't build my life on sand." The passion in his words silenced her. She had never seen a man so powerful speak so vulnerably. It was terrifying and intoxicating at once. That evening, Karim found them both in the garden. He ran to Amina, tugging her hand. "Will you stay forever?" he asked innocently. Amina's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Zaid, who stood a few steps away, his gaze locked on hers. "Forever," he said quietly, answering for her. But just as the word left his lips, a phone rang inside the house. It was a call from one of Zaid's board members, urgent, demanding his presence. A crisis had erupted in the company, threatening everything he had worked for. As he left, his parting words to Amina were soft, almost desperate. "Wait for me." And as she stood in the garden under the fading light, holding Karim's tiny hand, Amina wondered if waiting for him would cost her everything, or give her the life she had never dared to dream of. The boardroom was suffocating. Glass walls reflected the anxious faces of men and women who once hung on Zaid al-Hakim's every word. But now their eyes were full of doubt, some even contempt. They slid the scandalous magazine across the polished table toward him, the photo of Amina in the desert glaring up like a stain on his empire. "You are risking everything, Zaid," one board member said coldly. "Investors are nervous. Your reputation is built on strength and control. And yet here you are, distracted by a—" He paused, his lip curling. "By a nanny." The word burned through Zaid's chest. He leaned forward, his voice steady but firm as iron. "Her name is Amina. She's not a scandal. She is not a weakness. She is the reason I know who I am when I leave this room." The room fell silent. His declaration left no space for negotiation. Yet the damage was done. As Zaid rose and walked out, he knew he had lit a fire that could not be put out, one that would either consume him or free him. Outside, the world spun faster. Paparazzi swarmed his car, their cameras flashing like lightning. Questions were shouted. "Is she your mistress? Will you step down as CEO? What does your family think?" But Zaid's mind wasn't on them. It was on Amina. When he returned to the penthouse, the house was eerily quiet. Karim was napping. The staff had melted away, leaving only the soft hum of the air conditioner. And there in the living room sat Amina. Her small suitcase rested at her feet, his chest tightened. "No," he said immediately. "You can't leave." Tears welled in her eyes, but her chin lifted with quiet strength. "Zaid, this isn't just about us anymore. Your company, your family, your name, they're tearing you apart because of me. I can't be the reason you lose everything." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Don't you see? Without you, I already lose everything. Her lips trembled, and for a moment her resolve cracked. He dropped to his knees before her, his hands gripping hers desperately. The sight of the most powerful man she had ever known kneeling before her made her heart ache. "I don't need boardrooms or titles," he whispered. "I need you, and Karim needs you. The world can strip me of everything else, but they cannot take the choice of who I love." She shook her head, sobbing. "Love doesn't protect us from them. Then let me protect you," he said fiercely. At that very moment, Layla entered. She froze at the sight before her, her brother, the mighty CEO, kneeling at the feet of the woman she despised. For a long time she said nothing. Then, to their surprise, her voice softened. "Zaid," she said slowly, "you are destroying the Al-Hakim legacy." "I am saving my soul," he answered. Layla looked at him, her expression torn between fury and something else, something almost human. Finally, she turned her gaze to Amina. "If you truly love him," she said coldly, "then understand what this means. You will never know peace. The world will watch you, judge you, and break you apart." Amina's breath hitched, but she held Zaid's gaze. In his eyes, she saw no empire, no billions, no marble walls. She saw only truth. That night, Zaid made his choice public. At a press conference, under the blinding lights of the media, he stood with Amina beside him. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched forward, and the murmurs of 1,000 voices filled the air. "This is Amina," Zaid declared, his voice echoing through the hall. "She has cared for my son with more love than I have ever deserved. She has reminded me that wealth means nothing without heart. And yes, I love her. If my empire cannot withstand that truth, then my empire is not worth keeping." The room erupted in chaos. Some gasped, others applauded. A few stormed out in disgust. But Zaid did not waver, and Amina, trembling but resolute, stood at his side. Later, as they walked out of the building, Karim ran into their arms, giggling with the innocence only a child could carry. Amina held him close, her tears soaking into his small shoulder. Zaid placed his hand over hers, sealing the moment with silent promise. For days the world buzzed. Some called Zaid reckless, others hailed him as brave. Investors threatened to pull out, but loyal ones doubled down. Layla disappeared into silence, her power diminished, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the quiet night weeks later, when Amina sat at the same kitchen table where Zaid had first seen her blowing out a lonely candle. Only this time she wasn't alone. Karim clapped his hands as Zaid placed a cake in front of her, its candles glowing bright. "Make a wish," Zaid said softly. Amina looked at them, the man who had risked everything, the child who had given her purpose. And for the first time in her life, she didn't need to wish. She already had it. As the candles flickered out, Zaid leaned close, his forehead touching hers. "Do you trust me now?" he whispered. With tears streaming down her face, she smiled. Forever. And in that moment, surrounded by love, laughter, and the fragile beauty of truth, the CEO who once ruled empires finally understood what it meant to be rich. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who believes in courage, love, and second chances. Because sometimes the greatest wealth we can ever own is the love we choose to protect.